The government launched its Living with COVID plan earlier this year, and for the 3.74 million people who were identified as clinically extremely vulnerable, the dropping of restrictions is having a real impact. There are currently around 8,000 people living with an immunodeficiency in the UK who rely on immunoglobulin replacement therapy and feel they have been forgotten as day-to-day life is now more of a risk than ever. This is because COVID infection rates have hit an all-time high, with almost 5 million people, 1 in 13 of the population, estimated to have the virus, and people with immunodeficiency have no or limited protection against COVID. The ending of COVID restrictions, such as mask wearing, social distancing, and mandatory self-isolation, means that we are all free to get back to our previous lives. But for those previously shielding, this may not be an option, and many are having to choose to remain in self-isolation, despite receiving a 4th dose of the vaccine. The success of the COVID vaccine rollout and the spread of the milder Omicron BA1 and BA2 variants has perhaps made many feel that the pandemic is over. However, both the UK Health Security Agency, the UKHSA, and the World Health Organization, the WHO, have warned that this is far from the case. And although the spring vaccine boosters are available to the UK's most vulnerable, with more people likely to be made eligible later this year, the uptake has been very low so far, and there are concerns that the protection of previous vaccinations is beginning to wane. For example, there are 8.6 million people who had a second vaccine at least 3 months ago and have not yet come forward for a 3rd dose. For the immunodeficient, vaccines only offer a very limited level of protection, and significantly less than for those who are immunocompetent. The good news is there are preventative treatments for COVID, such as AstraZeneca's Evusheld prophylaxis, which is already being used to treat vulnerable people in 7 countries, and was approved in the UK on the 17th of March by the Medicines and Health Regulatory Agency, the MHRA. Unfortunately, the government has not indicated when the funds will be made available to purchase it, nor who will be eligible. UKPIPS, a support charity for patients with a primary immunodeficiency, is calling on the government to address this as a matter of urgency. The charity is also calling for the rules to change regarding COVID treatment for children. Currently, treatments such as monoclonal antibodies are not available for those aged under 12 years old, and although most children will only experience mild infection, there are those whose immune system leaves them vulnerable to more serious illnesses, including long COVID. UKPIPS also wants to highlight the impact that the last 2 years has had on mental health. Ill health, loss of employment and schooling, bereavement, isolation, and loneliness will all have a long-term impact on mental health. UKPIPS are therefore calling for more investment in mental health support. The pandemic has affected us all, but it's also highlighted the health inequalities that existed pre-COVID. We are joined today by Sue Dimmock and Lynda Rhodes on behalf of UKPIPS to discuss how the latest phase of the pandemic is affecting those living with immunodeficiency. So could you please tell us, in as much detail as you can, how do you think the government's Living with COVID plan is impacting those with a primary immunodeficiency?
It's affecting us significantly because our immune systems don't work, as you said in your introduction. We are not afforded the same protection that everybody else has been afforded with vaccination. So if you imagine the fear that we felt, everybody felt back in 2020 when there wasn't, nobody had heard of COVID and nobody had got any antibodies or any kind of immune defense against it. That's the fear that we feel on a daily basis. And for us, it's not just COVID, it's any type of infection. You can hear from my voice, I've got an infection now. I'm not going out, I'm not doing very much at the moment, but my family are, and I pick things up. It's just the way our systems work. So it's important to say that if anybody does catch COVID, we are much more likely to end up in hospital requiring medical intervention. And we've also seen evidence of people with immunodeficiency who retain the infection for a lot longer. So that treatments are important and protection for us is important. So the risks for us have significantly increased since the government, sort of ditched all of the or rather introduced the Living with COVID plan and ditched all of the protections that we had previously. So, and whilst we may have been able to rely on people wearing masks and shielding, self-isolating when they had COVID before, we can't rely on that now. And we've seen a huge increase in the number of cases amongst our community. We're seeing that right the way across the population. But for us, if we get it, there's serious implications. And so what we do is we're tending to stay away from doing things. There's a fear going out and doing it. That fear is well founded. Lynda and I have both lost really good friends to COVID. So in answer to your question, to put it really simply, we've not been able to live a normal life for 2 years. And we've got no idea really when we can live a normal life again, not worry about COVID.
And can you tell us, do vaccines work for the immunosuppressed?
That's quite difficult to answer because PID's an umbrella term and it covers over 400 different conditions. But the government tells us that we're protected by following the vaccination advice and by targeted testing. So in terms of vaccination, there's no evidence that says vaccination protects us. There's no published evidence. There's some unpublished evidence and research that suggests that after 3 vaccinations, we may get some protection. But we're all now being asked to have our 5th. And that's a lot of vaccination in a short space of time. And the question is, how long does that go on? Are they going to keep asking us to keep getting further vaccinations in the hope that we do have some kind of response? Now, targeted testing, great when it was available. We can still get free lateral flow tests and test ourselves, but our friends and families can't. They now have to pay for testing. That seems really cruel and marginalising. And also, we've been part of what was called the priority PCR testing programme, which the government has now scrapped. That was only set up at Christmas, but it's now stopped. And so we've only now got lateral flow tests to keep an eye on ourselves. And if we can share them with our families, which I do quite often because I need to know that they're not infected either. And I think it's notorious that lateral flows aren't particularly good at picking up an early infection. So we could have to wait quite a while until we know that we've got it, and we could be really poorly by that point. So I think what we really need what we really need to say is that testing only identifies the infection after it's too late. And what we really need is something to prevent infection other than relying on repeated vaccination, which we still don't know is doing us any good.
And what treatments are available for COVID prevention and treatment?
Okay, so since Christmas, we've had treatments available. They include both antivirals and neutralising monoclonal antibody treatments. That's only for people who are over 12 years of age. There is also, and we're very grateful for that, I have to say, we are grateful that there's treatment available, because if we do get COVID, at least we know there's some level of protection. But that's once we've got it. We don't want it in the first place.
No.
So in terms of that, there's potential to have, because we don't produce antibodies, Lynda and I don't produce antibodies, we have a replacement antibody therapy that's given to us routinely. And there is potential now for COVID antibodies to be coming along in that treatment, but nobody can tell us what level is actually in our product, what level we need to protect us, and how long that protection is going to last. And unfortunately, all of those different variables are likely to be really different for each of us and very complex to evaluate. So we need something that's preventative. The antibodies that are in our products will be used up really, really quickly if we get COVID. And so we need a top up. And so we're calling on the government to pull forward the one preventative treatment that's approved at the moment in the UK, and that's called Eversheld. And we want access to that as patients who are really struggling to live a normal life. We want access to that to give us a top up to the levels of antibodies that we don't, we're not likely to have at the moment. So, we're in a very difficult situation. I should also say that treatment's been available in the US since Christmas. In the US, they've had 2 doses now. And the second dose was given because of Omicron. The government is saying here that they're waiting on trial results from Omicron, from Eversheld, and they won't roll it out because it's not proven against Omicron. But as I say, patients in the US have been given 2 doses. We can't even get 1 here. And that is really discriminatory, it's marginalising. And I'll be very honest and say that I'm sure the fact that it costs £800 a dose has got absolutely nothing to do with the fact that we can't get it. We are frustrated.
And what are the main mental health implications for those living with PID during this pandemic?
The main implications really are literally fear of going out, fear of mixing, fear of never having a semblance of normal life again. If you just imagine how everybody felt at the start of the pandemic, knowing that they had no immunity to this horrible, virus that was killing people. And we will never have that as much as a normal person. We are immunodeficient, not which is different than immunosuppressed. So to be immunodeficient means our immune systems are either missing in part or complete, and don't work properly. So each time the barriers have been lowered by the government to restriction-wise what you can and what you can't do during COVID, it's caused differing amounts of alarm. And we do feel we're being discriminated against. We cannot safely go out and enjoy the same freedoms as everybody else as we used to. The thought of, we feel that we're disposable to the government. We feel that our lives and those of our cohorts don't really count. We don't get a say in anything. And it's like travelling back in time for me to pre-diagnosis, going back to feeling of drowning as you can barely breathe with the pneumonia that I constantly had. That's not the way I want my life to end. I lost a particularly close friend just at the end of last month to COVID, and she had a PID. So every time I go out, it's like a little risk assessment. Now, I don't go out to a shop other than there's a small shop quite close by, closes at 9:30. I go there at 9 because it's generally empty. Another shop I go to, I get there dead on the dot, well, before they open. So I'm first in and first out. So there's no queuing, no milling around in the crowds. And I mean, this year should be a celebration year. I'm 70 this year. We've got our 50th wedding anniversary this year. Can't go out and celebrate in the restaurants. All the tables are now moved close together again. And I know so many of our members feel the same way. And if I may, I've got some comments from them that I've noted during the various points. So I've got, this is terrifying. I'm bewildered, gobsmacked and scared. What on earth are they thinking? It's the worst thing they could have done. Are we to carry on as we are forever? And by that she means shielding, which I know isn't a term anymore, but it will never stop being a term for us. That's what we have to do. The news is petrifying me. Facts are we've been shielding, isolating, and now people can knowingly go out and infect others. It's signing our death warrants. And the last one I'll read out is, it's a nightmare situation. Good luck and best wishes to you all.
Sue and Lynda, thanks so much to you both. Excellent answers. And where can listeners go for more information, please?
Well, we have a website which they can find on www.ukpips.org.uk. There's lots of information on there. And also, if people can contact us if they're interested in perhaps volunteering or getting involved in some way.